So, recently I read this article. Actually, it was more of a blog post on AlaskanAirlines.com. And some of you might have read it. I don't know if you guys follow the Alaskan Airlines blog as religiously as I do.
We are reformed, but not that.
Right. So some of you might have read it, and it was actually a really amazing story. Alaska Airlines in 1948, at the end of 48 until early 1950, rescued almost 49,000 Yemenite Jews and brought them to Israel. During this time, to complete this transport of Yemen's Jews, Alaskan Airlines flew 430 flights over about the same number of days from Yemen to Israel. Pilots would fly 7 days in a row. For anybody, I know there's a lot of pilots in Alaska, that certainly wouldn't pass FAA regulations, 7 days in a row. But it took all of that work, all of those flights, to save Yemen's Jews. And in the decade after the establishment of the Jewish state, almost all the Jews living in the Arab world had to flee. Due to the backlash of the establishment of the Jewish state, they faced persecution or violence or even death. And so almost 800,000 Jews, they're known as Mizrahim. Mizrach in Hebrew means east, so Eastern Jews. They're a subset of the Sephardim. They fled the countries that their families had lived in for centuries. And it may seem easy to choose, in the face of persecution and the threat of violence, to leave your home. But for most of these Mizrahi Jews, it wasn't. It wasn't easy. Their families had lived there in these Arab countries for hundreds of years. They spoke Arabic. Before the establishment of Israel, they'd gotten along with their neighbors. They were integrated into these societies. They loved being a part of the Arab world. And these homes were the only places that they'd ever known. Leaving, for whatever reason, leaving your home isn't easy. No matter how important the cause or the reason, it's always hard. And in this Parshat that we just read, Lech Lecha, Avram, our forefather, gets a call. Unlike the refugees of Yemen and North Africa, he wasn't fearing for his life at the time or for the safety of his family. But just like those Mizrahi Jews who left everything they knew, he took a leap of faith. God tells Abraham, "Go forth from your native land, from where you were born, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you." Now, the text could have just said, "Go forth to a land that I will show you." But the reason why the Torah puts in all that extra language, from your native land, from where you were born, from your father's house, I think it shows us that even the Torah, even God recognized how hard it would be for Abraham to leave his home, to leave the only world that he'd ever known. The Torah underscores just how hard it is to leave everything behind. And most of us in this room know this truth as well. Most of you didn't grow up here in Juneau. Most of you were born down south on the East Coast, on the West Coast, but wherever we come from, we came here for a reason. Why did we come here? Probably wasn't for weather like we had today, I'll tell you that. But for many of us, it was to be surrounded by nature. Maybe for others, it was for a job. Maybe some of us fell in love. I don't live here, but I left my home in Memphis because Tennessee isn't known for its outstanding rabbinical schools. It's true.
But great senators.
Great senators, that's true. God bless Bob Corker this week. But for whatever the reason we left home, for whatever reason we left our families, our friends, and our way of life, it wasn't easy. And speaking of the news this week, as I was reading the Parshat and often listening to NPR on the radio, and actually I set my home station on NPR 1 to KTOO, so now I hear a lot of local Juneau news interspersed with that. But I was listening to the news and I couldn't help but think about the connection between our Parshat and the refugees around the world. This week, President Trump's 120-day, 120-day hold on allowing refugees to enter the United States expired this week. And President Trump didn't renew it. He did institute some more restrictions on males from certain countries, what he called during the campaign extreme vetting on those people. But starting very soon, the United States will once again be accepting refugees. And thank God. Because as I said during one of my sermons on Yom Kippur, the world is now facing the worst refugee crisis since World War II. There are 65 million people around the world who are displaced from their homes. And this year, in the United States of America, we will be accepting 45,000. 45,000 out of 65 million. Down from 110,000 just 1 year ago. And for anyone who has seen the images out of the Middle East, who's seen people just like you and me crowded and cramped on little rafts in the hot Middle Eastern sun, many of them, with people dying of thirst or hunger next to them on the rafts, or people washing ashore. Or for those of us who've heard the stories about kids being sent by their families up from Central America, riding alone as stowaways on cargo trains, and then reaching Mexico and crossing the border into America with coyotes through tunnels or over the desert. If we've seen those images and see how horrible that is, we can only imagine what type of home they're leaving. But even though their home must be horrible, for many people, it's still not easy to leave. And we as Jews, as much or as more than any other people, we should be sensitive to their plight, to the plight of refugees. Because just a couple generations ago, we were refugees. Whether our families are from North Africa, or whether they were in displaced persons camps in Europe after the Holocaust, we know as Jews what it means to be a refugee. And those of us in this room, those of us not from here, know how hard it is to leave home. So when we hear the cry or the call of refugees, we as Jews have a responsibility to listen. But even when we go to a new place, even when we leave home, we never truly leave. We're never gone forever, because we always bring a piece of our home with us wherever we go. For example, Ashkenazi Jews, we brought from the old country matzo ball soup and gefilte fish. Maybe we could have brought something else, but my favorite food in Israel when I lived there last year was marak kubeh. It's kubeh soup, which was brought over from North Africa to Israel from the Jews that left. It's these little dumplings with meat filled inside and a delicious broth. It's kind of like the North African Jewish version of wonton soup. It's really good. I highly recommend it if you're ever in Israel. I see a couple people in here who, when I was here over the holidays, were wearing Yankees hats. We bring our identity, we bring who we are, we bring our fandom with us wherever we go. And not only do we bring our identity, but we bring the love and the memories of our family and friends, of the people that we grew up with, of the love that was bestowed upon us and we shared in when we were growing up. Even if we leave home, we always carry that with us. But back to Abraham. Why did he leave? What made him leave? Yes, God told him, Lech, Abraham, go. But what made him leave? Abraham had faith. He had faith in God, but also he had a vision. He had a vision for what his new life would be like, in a place where he could praise God, where he could follow his God. He grew up in Ur of the Chaldeans, where his dad, actually, believe it or not, sold idols. He had a shop, according to the Midrash, where he sold idols. And Abraham said, I can't be in a place like this. I have to go to a new place where I can be myself, where I can practice the beliefs that I want to. But God also told him if he left, he would make the descendants of Abraham a great nation. And so Abraham left to practice his own beliefs, but also to build a better life for him and his children, his future children. And when we look at the 65 million when we look around at the 65 million refugees around the world, that's why they're leaving too. Yeah, it's not safe to be in their homes. They have to leave the only place that they've ever known, the families, the friends, the culture that they've grown up with. But they're leaving for the hope of a better life, of a second chance for their kids. And of course, it couldn't be easy to leave, but they're fleeing. They're fleeing because they have hope. And no matter what was taken from them, their spouses, their children, their homes, they are starting this new life because they have hope. And so, whenever we leave for a new place, whether we as Abraham or our ancestors or refugees or us in this room, whenever we leave home for a new place, the reason that we do it is because we have hope. And may we never lose it. Shabbat Shalom.